Can everyone hear me? Okay, confirm if you can hear me on the chat box. Okay, good evening. You are welcome to 2024, the IAM webinar for 2024. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure. Please, you might have to mute your mics, please, to avoid distractions. Welcome to this month's webinar talking about mastering record retention, a strategic guide for your organization. Today we'll be having a speaker, a fellow of the Institute from our London chapter. Okay, thank you very much. Sunday. From our London chapter by Emily Overton. Okay, and we wish all of you just pay attention to this great topic. It's precise and add a lot of value. So if you have any questions, use the chat box. Also, you might have to send us your questions. So anyone we can answer in the webinar, we'll have to take that later and send to you. Please, if you want to make any inquiries, you can write to the Institute email. Write to training@iam-africa.org. I'll put that on the chat box. So having said that, I think we have to commence. Our speaker for today, we have to look at it. We have some itches here and there, but it's okay. Please, I would advise you to make sure your volume is okay. Your mic is good. Your volume of your audio is at least on 60 or 50%, probably 70%, so you can hear properly. Thank you so much. I would like to just call upon the president to give an opening remark before we start. Mr. President, over to you, please. Yeah, we start.
Thank you, Mr. Nago. A very good evening and a happy new year to us all here present for the first webinar in the year 2024. It's indeed a good pleasure having you all here this evening, and we hope the topical issue we'll be looking at today, it's another area that quite a number of people over time has actually been trying, to get certain clarification, most especially now that we're talking about data privacy and data protection, where retention actually becomes something that is very, very important in helping organizations ensure that they remain compliant in terms of the data protection requirements for audits. So without taking too much of our time, I want to welcome you once again and also allow the resource person for today to do justice to this all-important topic. Thank you and have a wonderful session.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. So not to waste much of our time, I think we'll start. Thank you so much, Emily. So I think we can go ahead. Thank you.
So we've got some ground rules and administration, which I'm expecting the admin to be able to pause here and explain stuff to you. But I just thought I'd put in that this is a pre-recording that I've done for the Institute of Information Management Africa community. So there won't be any opportunity to ask me questions throughout. But if you save them up, my email is at the end, or you can ask the president to forward them on to me. But otherwise, I'll let the admin pause and explain the other pieces. Okay, so for those of you who don't know who I am, my name's Emily Overton, also known as Records Management Girl in the field. I'm principal consultant and director of my own business. I'm self-employed and I work globally, and I have done for quite a few years now. I started Records Management Girl back in 2015, and I eventually made the jump and went into full-time self-employment back in end of 2017. I've got approximately 16 thereabouts years, I think. At what point are you supposed to, stop counting and just kind of hope for the best. I don't know, maybe when I get to 20, who knows. I have done a postgraduate diploma with Dundee University for records management and information rights, but I actually only just completed that recently. I graduated technically in 2020, but officially in 2022. So I've worked all my way around the central government and the local councils and city governments and our National Health Service prior to doing self-employment. But now I probably 50-50 work with the public sector and also the private sector. And I get to do that both in the UK and around the world. So, yeah. Oh, and just to add, I got made a fellow by the Information Management Institute of Information Management Africa. People, oh my God, it's so exciting. I got to go to one of the London events, and yeah, you'll see my funky hat. I don't know if blue is my colour. I'll let you decide. But yes, I'm also a fellow of the Information and Records Management Society, and also accredited with them as well. I'd be curious actually to know how many of you in the audience actually have attended the RMS conference, because I've probably met some of you, so that's exciting. So I'm going to jump straight into it. Now, a lot of people will have heard about GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. I changed it about, and I said it was good documented practice with records. A little bit cheesy, but it's working for me. I've always said that I don't think that you can do data protection without doing records management. And I've yet to have anybody challenge me on that, but I'm always open to that actually happening. So if you want to challenge me and say you can do data protection without having good records management, let me know. So we have the international standard that is 15489 that defines a business record. And because it's slightly cut off with my face, I'm just going to read it out to you. So it's the information created, received, and maintained as evidence and as an asset by an organisation or person in the pursuit of legal obligation or in the transaction of business. It's pretty self-explanatory if you ask me. It doesn't encompass absolutely every piece of paper and every piece of data that we have on our screens. But it does give a pretty well-rounded explanation as to what we think a business record should be classed as. But basically, if it's showing you that it's a business transaction, what's there to disagree with? So that's generally what I follow. So there's some common things within retention schedules that we as individuals, not records managers really, but people out in an organisation, they misunderstand what they actually mean, and they're not aware that they need to keep them update or let a records management team know that something has changed, which changes the retention period. The first thing is about understanding them. A lot of people get freaked out about applying a number to their records, and that then, you know, it suggests a date that you should get rid of something. Because they think, oh my God, what happens if you put a date on it and then it gets destroyed and nobody asked me about it or anything like that? I always say that within a retention schedule is always a minimum. And I explain to the end users that this is a minimum. It doesn't mean that we can't extend it. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to destroy it without you knowing. What it does mean is it's a line in the sand that says, this is when we're next going to review these records for potential disposition. As for keeping them up to date, a lot of change happens in an organisation from year to year, well, even day to day, if I'm honest. And keeping them up to date is quite important. We're all too often letting a policy expire before we actually make any changes. So it's worthwhile if something changes with a retention period, whether that be a piece of law comes in, or your risk management within your organisation has changed and your risk appetite is much more risk averse, therefore you're keeping things longer, then you need to explain to them that actually maybe they should get in touch with you rather than us having to reach out to them all the time. And if something changes within the retention schedule, go, oh, wait, hang on a minute, is to keep that conversation flowing and it not just be a case of knock on the door. We need to speak to you about records retention. And then, oh, not you again. I always try and say is that, you know, we're here to help. Make sure that you're continuously talking to us about your records so that we don't get anything wrong. So in the next few slides, there's going to be quite a lot of text, but don't worry about writing down absolutely everything that's on the screen, because I'm going to be sharing my slides afterwards. The things that you need to pay more attention to is the extra that I'm actually adding into each of these bullet points. So let's go. So retention periods are set out in a retention schedule. Believe it or not, I've actually had to explain this to clients and people who are not necessarily records managers. They don't necessarily understand what a retention period is or a retention schedule. They get the gist, but they don't really truly understand. And as I mentioned in a previous slide, is that retentions are minimum periods unless otherwise stated. I know very few, especially in the UK, very few laws that have a maximum retention period. But I do know that one of the laws that we do have here, it actually affects the radiation industry, where they have to keep a physical record for something like 300 years, and that records the name on the tank that it relates to, that has to be readable for 300 years. And I was like, wow, that's a really long time. But it's in law, so it has to happen. Retention schedule is simply a policy document that's signed off by senior management. And yes, you read that right, or heard it right, is that do not destroy anything before it's been signed off by senior management. I can't stress this, I think, too much, because the amount of people, especially records managers, who have put through a policy and gone, yeah, okay, it's going to go through, not a problem, we'll just carry on. If senior management don't truly understand and buy into retentions on your policy, there's every chance that it could come back to the individual to say, hang on a minute, we didn't agree to this being destroyed, but now it's too late. What do we do about it? If senior management get the chance to read the policy, understand the policy, and maybe even have a one-to-one with each of the senior managements to make them understand what this means for the records within their directorates or within their teams, then they get an opportunity to go, oh, actually, I want to add a few more years onto that because of X, Y, Z. With senior management buying into the retention schedule and signing it off, it's on them if something goes wrong. And, well, not wrong necessarily, actually, that's the wrong word. If something happens after the records have been destroyed and they go, whoa, 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 hang on a minute. Who agreed to these retention periods being, who agreed that we could destroy these records? And that's pretty much where senior management should be at, they should sign it off, and they should buy into retention, and they should understand records management and what it means to them and their teams. A fact filing structure should be the way that you should be looking at organising your records so that you don't go any more than 3 levels deep. Because if you have a system in which you've got folders of folders of folders of folders, it basically means that you have the opportunity to potentially share or save a record in more than one place at once. So when it comes down to learning about what is the one version of the truth, which is the one that you should rely on as being the most up-to-date and accurate document, you could potentially come across too many issues and it'd be far too confusing. Unless otherwise stated on a retention schedule, general rule would be that you'd assume that it goes January to December. However, where it says financial year, in the UK, we follow a new financial year from the 1st of April to the 31st of March. And in the academic year, the kids start school in September in their new year, and it will run as a school year until July. But we must have somewhere for August stuff to go if anything is created. So yes, September to August. Company year is different for every organisation. An example being for Records Management Girl Consulting, it is October to September. I'm not entirely sure if that's correct. Yeah, I'm the only one that works for me. I think I'll have a look at that after just to make sure I know. Anyway. Retention is created on a topic or what the record is about. This is probably in my top 5 things that I'm always having to say to people. Because some people say to me, so how long do you keep emails then? Well, it depends. You know, what's the email about? What about, is there a difference between the physical and the digital version? Know which one's the master? It's only the master one that needs to be kept. But format doesn't change a thing. Also, on your retention schedule, don't list anything that you don't have, and don't suggest that the retention is based on a piece of law that doesn't actually cover you. An example of this is that if you have a hospital who solely deals in mental health, you're not going to have accident and emergency records on there. And if you are a central government or an organisation that doesn't get touched by, say, in the UK, it's like the Companies Act, which is about the private sector, that can't influence your retention schedule. Not really, no. You might take it as a note that, oh, this is how it's done in the private sector. But ideally, I wouldn't be putting that on my retention schedule. A lot of us will understand version control, but for those that aren't aware, version control is where you see a document with V and then 0.1 or 1.1 or 1.6 or 272.36. It doesn't matter what the numbers say, it just defines on whether something is a master or, sorry, a major or a minor version. A minor version is anything after the point that isn't 0, and a major version is following on from each other with regard to whether it's been shared or published or other people outside your team have had access to it. So an example being, if it's never been published and it's never been shared and it's only people within your team, the version control number would be version 0.63. Depends on how many version changes that you've had or shared around within your team. However, if it's been published and say the public has had access to it, it's most likely that you will then change it to 1.0. And then if you make any edits thereafter, it would be 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. And then if you republish the next version, it would be 2.0. And then edits would be 2.1 and so on and so forth. I recommend making sure that you keep everything that is a major version of your retention schedule. So don't worry about keeping the point whatever copies, but just keeping the 1.0, 2.0, 3.0 with a note of what has been changed at the beginning of each of them. Then you'll know how your retention schedule has changed over time. I think that details really everything that needs to be said on this slide. But having the change at the front of the policy, I find is really important, because you're not going to have somebody who has the time to go through the retention schedule and compare it to the previous version. So you just want to say, okay, retention 1.2 has been changed, and it's gone from this to this, so that when you share it with people who are already in know about the policy, is they can go, oh, right, great, okay, I need to extend the destruction date for these records because some law has changed. A trigger point is at which the periods of years start to apply. Now, this is something to do with the fact that on your retention schedule, when you are detailing how long you need to keep something, you need to provide the user with a trigger at which that time starts ticking. So say, for instance, you have a service user file and you need to keep it 8 years. You need to give them a point at which that 8 years starts ticking, so that they are able to create a destruction date, which would be when they would review the records for disposition. Now, the trigger itself, you can have any kind of trigger, but you need to be realistic about the implementation. A lot of times, because you need a date to create the destruction date, you can just go with the last action or entry date within the file, plus however many years. Or you can have from date of birth to plus 8 years, or date of death plus 8 years. But you need to remember that the trigger that you create, you need to have that piece of data available. If date of death isn't actively sought out from, say, a registrar and then cross-matched with the data that you have, then how are you going to know if somebody in the community has died? And we're talking like en masse data here. We're not talking the 1 or 2 people. Like when you've got, say, a service user file, you'll have multiple service users into the tens of thousands of service users. So you're not going to know exactly when each person has died unless you're notified and you use that data to cross-match. So find a date for the last entry is a lot better, that you can say, okay, well, the last entry in this file was 2013. We'll go from the 31st of December 2013 plus 8 years, and then that will determine what your destruction date is. And lastly, on your retention schedule, notes field. I love a good notes field. Perhaps I'm a bit sad, no, a lot sad, is that notes fields will provide you with any extra information you need to know before disposition. That notes field can be anything from see if the archives need this information, make sure it's destroyed in a certain way, any notes that the person who is actively looking to destroy the records, what they would need to know. Records may be weeded to reduce down file size where there's redundant, obsolete, or trivial information, or as I like to call it, rot information. All too often we have a lot of files that gain traction and gain a lot of information, multiple times, but then we find that actually in it there's things that has been published, there's stuff that's just been printed out and it didn't need to be on a physical file. You're gaining daily information that actually is not going to have any long-term impact. So there's an opportunity to weed out rot information so that it's not as big. A lot of the time you'll find that a file may go to storage and nobody ever considers it ever again because they don't have the time to bring it back and go through it. So weeding is probably better if you do it before it goes into storage. Retention also only applies to everything that is created by your organization. A lot of people think about this, say for instance, with their inboxes, so people get very particular about making sure they have an empty inbox. When realistically, what you should be looking at is the sent items, because the sent items is the things that you have created. An inbox, you can go back to the original person who sent you it, as they could have another copy of that, please. But the sent items, you're the one that's created it, and you're the one that's going to have to produce it if someone else can't find their copy. So think about that when you're thinking about creation of records and which things actually need to have retention added to them. If anybody is wanting to have an exception to their records management policy / retention policy, then this must be approved by somebody in records management, because that is someone who knows what they're doing. Each of the teams can't just, make their own policy or choose to ignore the policy that's in place. They must get it approved so that it's the right thing to do and that everybody knows what is happening. I mentioned earlier about retention periods being a minimum requirement and setting out an expectation. That's also something worth communicating with them. The periods of time can be extended if there is a business need to keep it longer, or something that can be reused. That really is the gist of it, in that people panicking over, oh my God, something's going to be destroyed after 8 years and I'm not going to get to know. No, we review everything before we destroy it. It's just saying, we're not going to touch this until at least X date. I've already covered the first 2 points earlier in this presentation, so I'm just going to move on to the third one. It's very much worth checking with a qualified archivist on whether the records within your records retention are of interest to the local place of deposit or archives. The reason why I say this is that all too often archivists don't get to hear about the records until it's either too late or they get given the wrong things. Because archivists pretty much only keep about 2% of everything that they have given to them. However, if they're able to know what current records are actually out there at the minute, and what is currently being used, they will be better prepared and able to store / have space available for those records when they are at the point at which they are no longer current and can be transferred. So I always advise that if you've got a retention schedule, long before you actually get a chance to even send it through to a senior management, is get an archivist point of view before it's even published, because then you can put that in the notes. We're getting to the end of my presentation, and it's always good for me to tell you that this presentation is also on my blog under the header of Retention Explained. So you can just go to www.rmgirl.co.uk/blog. Even if you've read Retention Explained, there's so many other posts out there that I have published. So take time to have a look through it. If anybody is looking for some records management assistance then I'm offering the community until the end of this month opportunity to have 10% off any of my fees. Way back when I started out doing records management, I created an infographic that kind of explained a lot more about the process of managing records. And I came up with these 5 blocks: creation, use, storage, review, and disposition, with a cheeky archives clause coming down and taking anything out of review back into storage. Now, this is a linear way of looking at it. Now, we could look at it from the records management continuum, but realistically is that you can just assume that these records can go out of review back into use, or out of review back into storage, or you can get all the way from review and put it back into creation, because you can restart and edit and change it slightly. There's so many options out there. And as the strap line of the Institute of Information Management Africa says, from information to value, is put those records into work and actually get them to mean something to your organization. So I'm just going to quickly go over some of the things that you should consider. Create your own policy, get it signed off by senior management, get the policy reviewed regularly, all decisions made by an accountable person with retention, and ensure people know what they're doing. And don't forget to log what you're getting rid of. After that, just do it. So that's me at the end of my presentation. I just want to say thank you very much. If you have any questions, I mentioned at the beginning that either you can give them to the president and he will forward them on to me, or you can use my email as listed on the screen. Don't forget to follow me on LinkedIn, and if you want to join my mailing list, feel free to email me to say so, and I can add you to it. But other than that, I just want to say my biggest of thanks to the Institute for allowing me to present to the community. I'm really sorry that I can't be there to present live. And I'm wishing you all a very happy new year. And I hope to speak to some of you soon. Thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Emily, for your deep, insightful presentation. So, ladies and gentlemen, I can see on the chat there are no questions. Are there questions or comments? Okay, there is none. So thank you so much, Emily, for that presentation. I hope we have learned 1 or 2 insights on the guides. We will move to the next point of the webinar. Just brief introduction of various, our president to give us a closing remark. After that, we will take a group photograph. Please, you might have to turn your cameras for us to take a group photograph. So if you have any question, just please use the chat box, please, or any comments. Otherwise, we will have our group photograph. So, Mr. President, please, your closing remarks before we call it a day.
Thank you, Mr. Nago. A very good evening once again, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Before my closing remark, I think the princess has actually been trying to join us, and the networks seem not to be favorable at our own end. So in closing, I want to say a very big thank you. We are honored to have you all again in 2024. We've started on a very good note, and I believe we're going to keep up with this momentum going forward in the year. So as always, you should expect wonderful sessions like this from our members across the globe. Shortly before the end of January, we're going to be announcing the February webinar and also the resource person. So on that note, I want to say a very big thank you as we look forward to having you again on board in February. For those that are yet to join the IIM family, this is another great opportunity for you. We're going to be having the first annual convention in the month of March in the United Kingdom on the 9th precisely. And prior to that, we will be having a 3-day leadership session, data session, where members and other qualified professionals will have the opportunity as we collaborate with the International University of Information Management to honor professionals in the field with honorary doctorate degrees in data management, information, records, archives, and so on and so forth. So it's also a good opportunity for those of us that might not be able to join the UK program, as we're going to be having similar programs to our various chapters this year. So it's going to happen 3 times in Nigeria. We're going to be having that of the United States, that of Canada, South Africa, Ghana, Australia, Switzerland, and so on. And so on that note, I'm saying a big thank you for staying up till this particular moment, because Nigeria is actually supposed to be having a football match. And at the beginning of this session, we thought we wouldn't even be able to get up to like 20 people to come online. But from our records at the back end, we've had more than 50 people coming in and going out of the session. So once again, I want to say a very big thank you. Do have a wonderful evening. For members that are here present, remember you can always request for your certificate of participation. It's available. And to non-members, they can also request for it, but it comes with a token. You'll be expected to pay a token to get the certificate of participation. So thank you very much, Mr. Nago, while I hand over back to you.
Thank you so much, President, for that closing remark. Please, ladies and gentlemen, please, can you please turn on your cameras for a group photograph, please, with your consent, please. The purpose for this is for us to publish it, to show for the attendance this webinar. But if you were not able to do that, please, no problem. Thank you, everyone, for attending. So I need to take the first page. I just have to wait some seconds for some members to turn on the cameras. Okay. Okay, we have 2 pages, right? So I'll have to take the first one. So some cameras are not on. Okay, maybe they don't want it on. So, okay, I'll just have to do it that way. Well, for those of you that don't want us to see their faces, it's a new year, we have to see your faces, right? Okay. Say cheese.
Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So that's for the first part. So I'll take the second page. We have a few persons on the second page. A lot of people's camera are not on. Okay, so we'll probably take it that way. If they don't wish to turn on their cameras. Second page. Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We actually have over 40 participants today for this webinar. Please encourage every other members to always attend the webinar. It's very educative, it's insightful. It also helps you for your continuous professional development as a member of the Institute. Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you in our February induction. You have a good night, and please go and support Nigeria. And thank you for your sacrifice. Nigeria is playing today, but education is education.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a very good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thanks, President. Thanks,
Thank
all
you.
members.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a
Thank you,
nice
Mr.
day.
President.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Good night. Well done, everybody. Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Night, night.
Good night.
Night.
Night, everyone.